Today we have with us Sanam Sindhi, an archivist and creative who works with South Asian beauty and passion. She is the creator of South Asia Archive, which is an Instagram forward digital archive of beauty, design references, and fashion history from South Asia. Before we start talking about your work, can you introduce yourself in your own words and describe what you do and what drives your creative work, what drives your work with South Asia Archive?
Sure. My name is Sanam. I am a researcher, archivist, consultant. I came from a background in marketing and creative direction. I was in Los Angeles for 10 years, so I worked with a lot of brands there. I'm mostly in the footwear and beauty space, kind of not directly in fashion, but in the periphery of fashion. And in 2018, I started the South Asia Archive project kind of just as a personal passion project for me. At the time, I was trying to take ideas to brands in America, to revolving around South Asian culture, like shooting campaigns in India, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And because American South Asian culture is very, very different from places like London and Toronto that have like a really deeply rooted, expansive brown culture. We don't really have that in America. A lot of brands at the time were not super interested, unfortunately. So I started this project because I was like, if these brands are not interested, I'm just going to start sharing this work of my own volition and see if people online are connecting to it. And they did. I mean, I'd kind of already been sharing a bit of my research on my personal account for like a few years before this, but 2018 was like the official launch of the archive project. And I stopped doing it for a while, from 2021 to 2024. And then I relaunched it last year with more of a renewed focus on physical materials and collaborative projects. So it's just been 6 months, I think, since I relaunched the project, but it's now kind of more of it's not just a research project anymore. It's more of like a 360 media project now where we're collaborating with bookstores, fashion brands, just anyone cool. So there's a lot of, I mean, not much that I can say right now, but there's a lot of upcoming projects that we'll be putting out this year. So we started the year with doing a library event in New York, and so we'll be traveling with that library to Los Angeles, to Paris, London, obviously here in India, doing an event in Bombay and hopefully Delhi. And yeah, there's a lot of expansive kind of creative projects that we'll be doing this year in publishing, in fashion, in just cool collaborative projects. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You talked about how it changed from just like a research project to something that dealt more broadly with media. Can you talk a little bit about why that was? Like, why did you decide to pivot?
Sure. I mean, I always wanted it to be something that lived offline and was something bigger than just sharing this research, right? For me, research is very much the genesis of any kind of creative practice, right? Whether you're a painter, whether you are a sculptor, whether you work in fashion, whether you work in art, like whatever creative industry you're in, your research practice really informs your work, right? Like we all start with that. So for me, I knew that the research was kind of the backbone of what the skeleton of the project would eventually be, but I always knew that I wanted to be something bigger than that. Initially I was like my goal from the beginning was to kind of just take it directly to fashion brands and consult for designers and people who were looking to enter the South Asian creative landscape, which at the time there wasn't this kind of global frenzy around coming to India and kind of tapping into brown culture the way there is now, right? So yeah, there wasn't like a huge interest in the project back then. And also, archiving as an artistic practice was not really understood so well,
Yeah.
outside of like institutional
Uh-huh.
facilities. I think now there's a much greater respect for it in general in like fashion and art, especially because there's been a huge surge in independent researchers and archivists and especially
Definitely.
fashion
Yeah.
researchers, right, in the last few years, and this kind of obsession with archive fashion for the
Definitely,
last few
yeah.
years. So I think the kind of cultural sentiments around it has shifted a lot, and that definitely, was part of the reason why I brought the project back as well,
Uh-huh.
because it's kind of, I mean, being the first to do something, which I'm not, but like just in general, when you're kind of early in the game, it can be really, really challenging, right? So
Definitely.
um, sometimes you take a break and you come back, and I definitely struggled at times with thinking that maybe it was too late to bring the project back, but I think if you're making work that's of great quality, it doesn't have
I
any
agree.
fear of time, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think now I'm kind of like very much into the idea of having this thing exist offline. Physical material was always such a huge part of my practice. And I do think that there is, you can't compare the feeling of turning the pages of a book to scrolling online. There's just no comparison.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think we need as much real life engagement. So, yeah, I mean, that was kind of the thought process behind bringing the project back and sort of restarting it as something that's more focused on programming in real life. I mean, it
Yeah.
still will exist online, and there is this plan to launch the digital platform this year because, as you know, it's only really been on Instagram for the last 8 years. So this year, the plan is to kind of digitize the entire archive and put it online for people to be able to access for free, along with a bookshop and a vintage clothing marketplace that I've been working on. Um, so, I mean, it is like both things complement each other,
Yeah.
right? But for me, uh, doing things in real life always has much more impact than
Yeah.
just existing online.
I completely agree. This is literally like one of the questions I had. It's like, how do you get people to actually engage with your work, especially if it's just on Instagram? So, how do you get them to actually have all that kind of information and pay attention in that way? But you talked about how, independent researchers and archivists weren't really recognized before. And sure, I think this is becoming more widespread now, but there probably come like a specific set of challenges because you're not associated with someone. So how do you get access to materials for your archive, and how do you kind of um, build that out?
I mean, for me, honestly, most of the stuff that's in my archive is that's funded by me. The project is funded by me.
Yeah.
Obviously, I have work that I do with clients, and that money goes towards this project. I was consulting for a few private collectors for a bit in the initial couple of years of the project, and I was able to get some private grants to fund the work. And, for me, whenever I was working with a brand, especially brands who were interested in profiling my work with the archive, I always try to maintain a relationship where it's like, it's not just about highlighting me as the founder of the archive, because for me, this project is not about me, right? Like, I'm not interested in being the face of something. I'm not interested in being known as like the founder of the project. For me, the focus should be on the project, right? So when a brand would come to me and say, hey, we want to shoot a campaign about your work, I'd say, cool, put some funding into the project and we can talk, you know what I mean? You kind of have to be very savvy about it because it's not easy. It's really not
Definitely.
easy. And I don't like romanticizing the idea that, an archivist or a researcher is a fun thing to be, because quite frankly, it's not. It's a very noble pursuit, and you have to really love it and
Yeah.
be okay with the fact that it is extremely, extremely challenging if you are not working in an institution. If your work as an independent researcher or archivist is outside of the bounds of academia, or art institutions, you just have to be okay with the fact that you have to work 10 times harder, right? To get
Definitely.
the resources, the materials, the respect for people to pay attention to your work. But I think as much as, we all kind of have our conflicting relationships with being online and with Instagram, it is a platform where you can reach
Yeah.
anyone, right?
Yeah.
For that matter, even TikTok, Twitter, like whatever platform where you can find your audience, right? I think the internet is great for that. And I definitely, I wouldn't have the audience that I have if I hadn't just started sharing the stuff online. And it very much is
Yeah.
about making quality work, but also being consistent. And that can look very different for different people, right? Like for
Yeah.
some people, consistency is like, oh, I go online and I post every day at this time, and no matter what the content is, I just put it out. And for me, I care a bit more about the quality of what I'm putting out over the quantity. Um, but I think at the end of the day, it is just about being consistent as an artist
Yeah.
because, if you rely on inspiration or feeling impassioned to do something, that's not dependable. That's not inspiration is not dependable. Um, if I only depended on working on this when I felt inspired, I would never do it. So I didn't do it for 3 years because I was not inspired to do it for three
Yeah.
years. And I think now it feels like more of a calling, um, and less of something that I'm like, oh, I have to feel impassioned by this, which I do. I'm super passionate about what I do, and it's like life or death for me.
Yeah.
Like this is my life's work. I cannot go back to working like a corporate job or like that's not for me. And I knew that, and that was a big step for me to take, to say I'm investing in this project full on. This is what I want to do with my life.
Yeah.
And that I'm willing to take on the challenges that come with that, because it's not easy and you have to be a hustler and you have to work extremely hard. And I was very lucky to kind of already have a bit of a platform, and have had made connections throughout my career and
Yeah.
have like a bit of a creative network, and everyone doesn't have that starting off. But I think that if you make good work and you put it out, which is like the biggest thing, is not being scared of sharing your work, which is
Yeah.
something that I still struggle with 10 years into my career. You'll always find your audience. The people who you want to connect to and who connect to your work will always find you.
That's really fair. Like obviously it's taken so much time because the culture was catching up to you. Um and I mean the project is now where you want it to be and it's
Yeah.
expanding, right? I was wondering like how you talked about how you thought of this as kind of your calling. Why specifically just like South Asian culture and South Asian beauty? Was it like just like personal interest, or was it also like often these fields of view are quite under researched by institutions, so the fashion department and like the departments that research like costume history are not
Yeah.
going to be funded even in like the biggest research institutions. So was it a combination of that? Was it just like
It was just personal interest, honestly. It was very much personal interest, and also, it was like it was a very spiritual kind of thing for me. I think in India, when you grow up in India, right, you don't have this kind of identity crisis around what it means to be a brown person and where you fit in and how you
yeah,
navigate the world, right? But that's like a huge, huge part of being first generation, especially in
definitely.
the diaspora. And again, I was very lucky to not feel it as intensely as other people in the diaspora because I also grew up in India. Like I went back and forth a lot. I went to boarding school here when I was a kid for just a year, but it was like enough for me to kind of be like, okay, I have a connection to my
Yeah.
identity, right? Like I don't feel, I mean, I know a lot of South Asian people who feel very, very disconnected from home and kind of have this like eternal yearning thing. Um, I don't have that anymore because of this project. I think I did at one point, I think when I started it, it
Yeah.
very much shaped what I wanted to research, right? Because in general, like, my fixation isn't necessarily on South Asia. My general research practice is art, fashion, whatever, right? But I think at that time, because of what I was what I must have been feeling. I don't know, it was so long ago. It was like almost 10 years ago. But I imagine whatever I was going through at that time, especially because living in, again, America, there's not this diasporic communal
Yeah,
culture, right? That London has, that Toronto has.
definitely.
So it's quite isolating, I think. And also, I just didn't love the brown people that I was meeting in America, you know? The diaspora culture there is very interesting. I don't think people have figured out exactly how to talk about it still. Um, but, you know, we just, I don't know, it's very different. And I think I didn't feel super connected to the brown people in America, right? So my friends were always, I was friends with all different kinds of people. I had like a very diverse friend group
Yeah.
and social scene. And so I think there always was this thing, though, in the back of my mind where I was like, I would love to find more South Asian people to connect with, but like cool ones, you know, people who are interested in the same things I am. And this project also felt like a vehicle for that, right? Like it actually has
Yeah.
connected me with so many people, but not just there, which was initially what I was looking for, but here. And I think coming to India and meeting people here and having people here tell me that they loved my work or that they were interested in what I was doing was the most validating thing for me. Because it's one thing to, you know, have a certain level of success in LA or New York or like in some huge metropolitan European city, whatever. But I think coming home and people here validating my work
Yeah.
was like a completely different feeling, you
Yeah,
know?
because then it feels like you're actually representing them.
Yeah, and that I'm doing it with grace and tact,
Yeah.
which I think that a lot of people in the diaspora don't do, you know? It's, again, another conversation that I think has been brewing for a while, and that people are, I mean, I know people talk about it, but I don't know how openly the conversation is being had still. But, you know, for a place that has historically been so extracted from, you know, the diaspora is not necessarily exempt from that. Like our relationship to our homes have also been sometimes very extractive and can be very extractive. And so I think I was always coming from a place where I was like, I don't want to have that same sort of predatory view on where I come from and what interests me about it. I wanted to, you know, highlight something else also besides like Bollywood and whatever kind of South Asian culture that at the time, especially online, you know,
Yeah.
was like what was being pushed out the most. I just found that there were so many other interesting things about South Asia to platform. So yeah, it had a lot to do with that.
That makes a lot of sense. You talked about how like the the culture of the diaspora was one that you didn't feel like you fit into. Was this
Yeah.
like um, was this primarily a thing about your interest being more art oriented and like oriented towards, you know, the creative side of things, or was it just in general how people within the diaspora talked about South Asian culture?
I think a bit of both. Um, you know, as you know, culturally, there's not this sentiment in our upbringing and stuff to value art or to pursue artistic careers. I mean, I feel it's very different now, I think, especially with young people. But, you know, I'm 34 years old, so I grew up with the same kind of stereotypical, like, go to school, do something of value, of that will bring you financial success, et cetera, et cetera. It's like a very classic sob story that we all have. But I think that for me, it was a lot about the taste as well. Like I think that because maybe we don't always have access to the best art education or fashion education, which is no one's fault, right? Again, we're not expected to go into
Yeah.
those kinds of careers. I just felt a lot of times that, you know, even there was a project that I wanted to do in 2015 when I first started my career that was like focused on South Asian art. And I remember, I've never talked about this, by the way. I remember, you know, putting out a call online and saying, like, I have a project I'd love to work with. If you're a South Asian artist, email me your work. And the work that I got in my email was just bad. It was really bad. It was not great. I mean, obviously not all of it was terrible, but it just wasn't great. And I just felt like maybe we're not ready yet for that kind of thing. You know, maybe there's like time that needs to be there for this to incubate, for us to kind of develop our taste a bit more, to understand art a bit more, to and to also figure out what our artistic movement is, right?
Yeah.
In this generation or in the diaspora, because again, we don't really have the kind of movements that were happening in India or Sri Lanka, like, you know, like very classic artistic movements of like the 40s and 50s, and even later on, like in the era of Gogi Sarojpal and Bhupen Kakkar, you know, like we don't have that.
Yeah.
And again, that has a lot to do with culturally how times have changed, and we just don't invest in the arts anymore, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I can talk about this for hours and get very deep with it. So I just felt that, you know, the level of work wasn't there at the time. And that was part of why I didn't feel connected to other people in the diaspora there. It was also like, you know, there's a lot of class things that come into play as like, you know, of course here as well, but that carries over abroad. Yeah, I don't know. There's no really eloquent way to put it. I just didn't feel like the people that I met, there's always exceptions, of course, you know, but I didn't feel that the South Asian people that I was meeting in America were people that I connected with or had similar interests with. And often I found that any kind of artistic work they made was very much centered around their identity, but not in a way that was very refined, you know? It was like quality of the work comes second and I'm brown comes first. And for me, whatever I did was always that the quality of the work comes first, right? And my identity comes second. So I did eventually start like meeting in my 20s, I think, when I moved to Los Angeles, which is funny because LA is like, has way less brown people, I think, than New York. But, you know, I started meeting some people that I was like, oh, there are cool brown people out there. And so that definitely shifted my perspective a bit. But still, I think even now, when I go back to America, I have a really hard time finding South Asian people from my age group that I really connect with. When I did this event in New York, I was honestly so happy because the young people that came to this event, you know, like the teenagers and the people in like their early 20s, and it was an entire kind of group of the South Asian diaspora that I had never met before in America and never seen. And I think what young people are doing there is so exciting. You know, I love the work that they're making. I think they're super smart, just very sharp, have great taste, have a really keen sense of critique. Are not, you know, are also not interested in work that's just about identity. Like they expect a level of quality to it, you know? So I am really excited to see what comes out of that age group. My age group, I'm kind of like, whatever.
So, are there like aspects of because you kind of grew up in between the US and here, did you feel like there were aspects of your culture here and the kinds of people you saw here or the kinds of art that you kind of encountered here that you felt were like specifically missing from the diaspora and are making their way there now, and you know that kind of level of articulation about their like people's identity and like including all the nuances of that like the younger generation is doing? Did you feel like what specific aspects of that did you think were missing maybe?
I mean, I think it just is related to the identity crisis thing, right? Like if you feel so disconnected from your identity and you're so unsure about who you are, naturally your inclination is to make work and take an interest in things that are about that, right?
Yeah.
And again, in India, you don't have this thing of like, oh, I went to school and they made fun of my stinky lunch, and you know, this like the tropes, like the classic diaspora tropes, which are very valid, right? Like I know it's like a lot of like joking about them, and I joke about them as well, but those are valid things that we've all experienced. I think we get a little bit too hung up on them and then just like don't progress past that. But yeah, I just think that, when you grow up in a place where everybody looks like you, it's such a different experience. You're not going around questioning your brownness. So your work doesn't stem from a place of, I have to announce my identity to the world and I have to do some justice to myself, existing in a space where nobody looks like me. That's just not a thing here. In some ways, it is. If we get into like caste system and that kind of thing, like, sure, that is, I'm sure that a lot of people connect to that kind of feeling no matter where they are. But I think that specific thing of, even when we talk about aesthetically and the way that everything that is made about South Asia, from the diaspora, whether it's a beauty brand, whether it's a photographer, whether it's a painter, it kind of all relies very heavily on a singular stereotypical aesthetic, right? So I just think that, I don't condemn that as a starting point for anyone. I think that we all have to start from somewhere, right? Especially if we're in some kind of artistic pursuit, like where else do you start but figuring out who you are? But I think to never grow past that and progress past that doesn't make for good work. So
is there any like specific art or artists or like photographers or anyone's work from the diaspora that you're really excited by now, that like that kind of work wasn't there when you were starting
out? No. No, not really. I mean, like I said, I love what the young kids are doing. There's a girl who was in LA who I think is in New York right now. Her name is Vishwa. I just found her online like a long time ago. I don't like fully understand her art practice, like very abstract. Like she was making clothes for a while. She was doing some video work, some photography. But I thought she was very, very cool. I liked what she was doing. It seemed at least like it was, again, like she was able to talk about her identity in a way that just felt a bit more ontological and less, loud. And I think that subtlety is important, right? I think if you are a great artist, that you should be able to speak subtly. You don't have to yell about what you're trying to say, and you don't have to be the loudest person in the room, right? So, I mean, I like what the young kids are doing. I think, we have, again, very, very limited representation in the arts in the diaspora still. And there's people who are working to change that, obviously. There's like a new gallery that opened in Los Angeles that focuses specifically on contemporary South Asian art. There's a lot of kind of initiatives happening to profile those artists and those people's work. But if I have to compare that work to what comes out of India, I don't think there's a comparison still. I think the work being made in India is much more interesting.
That's fair, because I think it's had time to develop, it had space to develop. But
exactly.
Do you see, like, you have South Asia Archive is like just a collection of images from all points in time that like speak to those kinds of subtleties that you wanted to talk about, and talking about your identity in nuanced ways, and being like talking about being brown in a way that's sophisticated and actually says something about it. So do you see like visual similarities or like trends or like things that people are now coming back to that you've already highlighted as part of the archive?
Can you rephrase that question? I don't know if I fully understand it.
Like, are there things within the archive and within your research that you found that people have come back to now?
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah. I mean, I think there was never a point where people weren't looking at that research and feeling connected to it, right? I don't know if, like, in terms of some kind of trend, I don't know that the work that I share is necessarily I don't know, has that aspect of, oh, like now this is cool, so people are coming back to it and, sharing it or engaging with it more. I don't know if that's necessarily a thing with my work, but I think there's always been a deep interest specifically in the beauty stuff, right? Like in the tattoos and the jewelry and I think there there are a lot of, like, I would say young jewelry brands now that are kind of, even in India, right, that are kind of orienting their language now around inspiration from these tribal communities or from like heavily research based
Yeah.
perspectives. So that's definitely something I've noticed and I think is very cool. But aside from that, I don't know, I can't really think of anything.
Yeah, no, I mean that's fair. I think tribal symbols and things like that. Um, uh, with the archive, do you think because of the fact that as it currently exists on social media, there's maybe do you feel like there are things within your research that you can't fully communicate because of the constraints of the platform, and what are those kinds of things?
Oh, 1000%. I mean, I think that there's a lot, I'm sitting on like mountains and mountains of research because I've been doing this for
Yeah.
10 years now. And there's so much that I just haven't shared because I can't figure out how to package it into a concise way, online.
Yeah.
And some things I feel don't deserve to be packaged in that way. I think some things need a different platform. Um, some things require a different vehicle for expression. So, yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, right, that whenever you share something online, especially in terms of content and making it easily digestible, it automatically removes like a lot of context and nuance and intricacy.
Yeah.
So I think, again, that's just something that you accept if that's your vehicle for sharing the work, which is again why I kind of want to work on a larger, more expansive digital platform, where we can get more in depth with the storytelling and also give people access to the materials, because that's a super important part of what, the mission of the project is. So yeah, it definitely can be hard to translate certain research subjects online. But you do the best you can, and I think one thing that I've learned is that there's no limitation, right? The only constraints are the ones in my head, where sometimes I'm like, oh, I've already talked about this, so I can't talk about it because it's not new or interesting to people anymore. Like, that's something I'm constantly struggling with. But I forget that, sometimes that's because I've been looking at something for 5 years, and it's still new to someone else, so it's worth sharing. So yeah, I think it's very much about setting your own parameters. I don't know that it's necessarily like there's a guidebook for it,
That makes a lot of sense. You said you're working on an expansive digital archive. Are there new challenges that you've faced and your team has faced with that?
I mean, just getting it done is very hard. Getting it done is very hard, and I don't really have a lot of help at this point with this project. So I think just the logistical stuff can be very difficult. I mean, I think some people might think that the actual process of digitization is very tedious and difficult. For me, it's something that I really enjoy. I find it very meditative and therapeutic, like I can spend like a week scanning books without a break. It doesn't drive me insane at all. It's like my favorite thing to do. But it is, again, like a very tedious process, and regardless of what field you're working in, when you're doing any kind of research or archiving work, obviously you have to be very meticulous about citing sources and making sure information is accurate and unbiased, and that you're providing people with the tools to use that information in new ways. So I think it's, regardless, it's a very like academic and scholarly thing, and it's very intensive. So I think that's definitely can be challenging. But I don't know that anything about the digitization of all of this is that challenging, besides just the amount of work it takes to get it done.
Yeah. I guess it seems therapeutic to like just get to look at pretty art and scan pretty art, I guess. But
Yeah.
just to wrap this up, a final question: is there anything specific that you're really interested in right now, like in terms of things that you're researching, or like just things you're paying attention to in art and beauty and fashion and whatever?
Yeah, I have like an ongoing list that I keep of research subjects on my phone. Let me look at it because I'm a bit exhausted today. Sorry, as you can see.
Fine. I usually ask people this question and they don't have an answer to this question. So the fact that you have a list is,
Okay, footwear. I'm
Yeah.
very, very interested in tracing the history of Indian and South Asian footwear. I have been researching, mojlis and jutiya and all of that, and trying to draw the connection to contemporary footwear because there's like this theory that the first high heels were worn in South Asia, the platform shoes. So I don't know. I'm trying to research things in a way that is, again, very academic, and I want to be very careful about like putting out very, very accurate information, but I also want it to have a bit of playfulness to it, and just a more artistic approach to that. And then also, what else am I researching right now? Hold on, let me take a look. I have been super interested in understanding how do I put this? I kind of have a theory about why it is the way that it is, but the kind of timeline of ready-to-wear clothing specifically becoming available in South Asia, and how that has changed its relationship to fashion, and specifically its relationship to like Japanese fashion, which is not a huge thing here, right? And part of that must be because it's too hot to wear things like Comme des Garçons and Yohji Yamamoto, and kind of just all the different factors that influence style here. And also, I'm really, really obsessed right now with these corsets that are worn by this tribal community in Rajasthan and Gujarat called the Garasias, and they wear these, like, have you seen it? The embroidered kind of, it's called a julki, but it's these embroidered, then they're all customized for each person. These embroidered
like over the sari.
It's not a sari. They wear like these skirts that are from repurposed fabrics and materials, and the julki is like, it's all tailored specifically for each person, and the embroidery that's on it. The thing is that's so interesting about it is it's like, it looks not Indian in any way, it's very it's just very different from any other kind of tribal sartorial anything that I've seen in my research. So I find that very interesting. I'm researching that right now, and it's, again, something that is so hard to find information about. I think for me also, a big goal of mine with this project is to now start getting into field research, which is something that historically I haven't been able to do, right? Because that requires institutional backing, funding. It's very, very difficult to conduct as like an independent researcher who's just doing it for fun. That's something that requires a team of people who really know what they're doing. But I think because there's so many gaps in some of the things that I've been looking for years, now I'm at a place where I'm like, okay, I want to start filling those gaps by actually going there and finding the things,
So you should come to Rajasthan.
I know I should come to. I've been to Jaipur, obviously, but I like, India's so big, India's so big. I'm like, how could you ever cover it in one lifetime or understand it in one lifetime? It's impossible. And then it's like, I haven't even been to Nepal yet. I haven't been to Sri Lanka. There's a lot to do, and again, it's mostly just me, and I'm one person working on 1,000 things. So it is, I think the whole process, this whole practice, this passion has taught me a lot about patience. and that, again, things of quality have no fear of time. So I think when I started this project, things felt very dire, and I was like, this is life or death for me, and I have to get this out now. And now I'm very like, if something takes 10 years to finish, I'm totally happy with that. I'm okay with that. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. That seems like something that would lead to quality work, and you've highlighted that a lot. Thank you.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Sorry, what?
Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Thank you for reaching out and asking such great questions. And sorry for my state. It's been a very long week.
I love your answers. Like, they were very insightful.